Have you ever noticed how two people can go through the exact same experience and come away with completely opposite stories about what happened? One person walks away feeling defeated, rejected, or unlucky. The other walks away feeling grateful, resilient, and wise. Same moment, different meanings. And that's because we're not reacting to life, we're reacting to the story we write about it. This video is not about charts, not about technicals, not even about discipline. At least not in the way most people think about it. This video is about your internal narrator. Because here's the truth. Most of us live our entire lives thinking we're reacting to reality, but we're not. We're reacting to the meaning we've silently attached to it, sometimes years ago, sometimes from a single moment, and now we interpret everything through that lens. And that internal narrator, that voice that assigns meaning, creates stories, and names what we think as just the way things are, is one of the most powerful forces you'll ever come up against. Let me ask you a few questions to kick this off. Have you ever had someone say something neutral and it hit you like they were attacking you? Have you ever failed at something one time and instantly created a story that this just isn't for me? Have you ever watched yourself repeat a pattern you swore you were done with even though you knew better, either in life or trading? If you've been there, welcome to the human experience. Because your brain doesn't care if something is true, it cares if it's consistent with the story you believed for years. And if your identity, your internal narrator, believes something like, "I'm not a very disciplined person," you could win 10 days in a row, yet still find a way to give it all back on day 11. That story will pull you back not because you're lazy, but because your brain is always trying to make your sense of self match with your lived experience. If your identity says, "I'm someone who doesn't follow through," your reactions, choices, even your memory will bend to confirm that. That's why people sabotage good relationships, why successful people crash when they reach their goals, why so many traders repeat the same mistake even after spending thousands of dollars on education and strategy. Because you can change your environment, you can change your habits, and you can change your systems, but if you never change the story underneath, the narrator running the show, eventually it all snaps back to the baseline of who you believe you are. This video isn't about motivation, it's about meaning. Because what you believe about yourself determines how you translate the world in front of you. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So here's our mission: not to fix your habits, not to give you tactics, hacks, or quick fixes for discipline. In this video, we're going to expose the narrator that's been running your internal script in the background, recognize the stories you've been repeating as truth, identify the repeating outcomes that are just the expressions of those stories, reclaim the pen so that you can rewrite the next chapter intentionally. Because if you can change the story, the narrative framework of your identity, you can change everything. Behavior, habits, discipline, results, emotional stability, financial peace, self-trust, all of it rests on the story you're telling yourself about yourself. So let's get right into it. Your internal narrator, that voice inside your head that's constantly interpreting reality, is working 24/7. And it has one primary job: make sense of what's happening in a way that keeps you physiologically safe. Safety over truth, safety over dreams, safety over possibility. It doesn't care about your goals, it cares about consistency. This narrator was formed early in life. Some parts are inherited, others come from key moments. Someone criticized you at the wrong time. You failed big once and felt deep shame. Someone you trusted let you down. You were praised only when you performed. You watched someone close to you constantly play small. Whatever the origin, that voice learned to create stories like, "I'm always too late. People like me don't get ahead. I'm bad with money. I always mess it up in the end. If this goes well, something bad will happen next." These weren't random stories, they were mental defense mechanisms, ways to prepare for pain before it arrives. So fast forward to today, and your external world is being filtered through that same lens. Not what is this moment, but what does this moment mean about me? Someone doesn't respond to your message, you feel unimportant. You lose 2 trades in a row, you feel ashamed, undisciplined. You get overwhelmed by tasks, you feel like a failure, a fraud. But none of those are the objective reality. They are interpretations, internal meaning disguised as external truth. So now that we've met the narrator, let's talk about the lie it tells you most often. This is just the way things are. But here's the truth. Your brain is not a camera. It's not recording reality objectively. It's more like a movie editor that keeps cutting scenes, adding voiceovers, and rearranging the footage based on what it thinks the story is supposed to be. That process is called memory bias, and we all do it. Here's how it works. Once your identity settles into a belief, for example, I'm bad with money, your brain begins scanning your life for evidence to support it. You notice every time you overspend. You replay every time you lost money. You downplay the wins, you ignore the growth, and you start to predict loss before it happens. You become the main character in a movie you didn't even realize you were starring in. That's why it doesn't matter how many people tell you, you're smart, you're improving, you're building momentum. If you don't see it, the internal narrator deletes the evidence. You remember the pain vividly and you forget the progress entirely. And that's not a personal flaw, it's your brain doing what it was evolved to do. Confirm the story it's already invested in, because changing the story threatens the fragile feeling of control. Let's take a real example. Let's say the narrator's story is, I'm just not disciplined. You start a new habit, a trading journal, a workout plan, budgeting, whatever it is. You stick to it for 5 days straight, but on day 6 you miss. Out loud you might say, I missed 1 day, no big deal, back on track tomorrow. But your internal narrator, it says, see, I knew you'd screw this up. You always quit. You're not a consistent person. And now the identity loop kicks in. Story leads to emotion, which leads to behavior, which leads to outcome, and then the story gets reinforced. Let's break that down. The story is I'm not disciplined. The emotion you might feel is guilt or shame. The behavior would be avoidance or giving up or doing something comforting. And the outcome would be that the habit breaks down, and there's evidence of inconsistency and the story gets reinforced. Yeah, this is just who I am. I'm not disciplined. It's not that you don't know how to do it's that your identity quietly rejects the idea that you are the kind of person who does it. Let me say that again because it's huge. You can't outperform your identity for long. You can act disciplined for a few weeks, you can force a new habit for a bit, but if your internal story says this isn't really who I am, you will always find a way to come back to that familiar feeling, even if the familiar feeling is failure. But here's the wild part. You will also rewrite your memories to justify the story. If you believe I'm always the one who gets left behind, you'll remember moments that confirm that, and your brain will quietly crop out the times you were supported, welcomed, or included. If your story is I can never stick with things, you'll recite every unfinished project and forget the things you've actually accomplished, no matter how impressive they were. You know why? Because your brain, your narrator, would rather feel right than feel free. Freedom requires change. Change requires uncertainty. Uncertainty feels unsafe, so the story stays the same. Let's get practical now. I want you to think of one area of your life, trading, relationships, physical health, money, business, where you've said to yourself, why does this keep happening? I know better. Why can't I just break this pattern? Let's name this clearly. That repeating outcome is a reflection of a repeating inner story. You don't have a productivity problem, you have a story about your productivity. You don't have a cold streak problem, you have a story about being unlucky or inconsistent. You don't have a relationship problem, you have a story about being unloved, misunderstood, or too much. And you've been running that story on autopilot so long that it feels like reality. If that story were a person, it'd be whispering in your ear constantly. You always get overwhelmed. You're not the kind of person who finishes things. People don't really care what you say. If you do well, they'll expect more from you. You're doomed to repeat the same mistakes. That voice isn't you, it's just the narrator. But most people will live their entire lives believing that narrator instead of questioning it. Let me give you a real simple example. There's a line that I hear all the time. I'm always late. He will say it casually like it's a fact, no shame, no questioning, just an identity declaration. But here's what happens. Once you believe I'm someone who's always late, your behavior bends toward that identity. You don't plan ahead, you underestimate time, you feed the loop, and guess what? You stay late. Not because you can't learn to be punctual, but because your narrator is protecting the identity. You're subconsciously more comfortable being late and familiar than being early but unfamiliar, because unfamiliar feels unearned and unsafe. All right, I want you to pause, take a breath, and answer this question to yourself or write it down. What is one repeating outcome in your life, the thing that keeps happening again and again, even though you know better? One sentence, no filter. For example, I always lose money after I start winning. I always end up in relationships where I feel unseen. I always wait until the last minute. I always burn out and give up. I never follow through once I'm out of the hype. Whatever it is, name the outcome. Now here's the second part. Underneath that outcome, there is a story your narrator keeps repeating. Finish this sentence. The story underneath this pattern is, and fill in the blank. For example, I'm not someone who can handle success. Or maybe the story is, if I really try and fail, I'll prove I'm not enough. Or people like me always get left behind. I'm too chaotic to ever be stable. I don't deserve to have it all go right. Or if I slow down, everything else might catch up to me. Then pause, look at what you just wrote or thought, and ask yourself, is that an objective truth, or is that just a familiar story my narrator keeps handing me? This is the wake-up moment, not because the story is gone now, it's not, but because for the first time you're consciously meeting the narrator behind the behavior. And that's the crack in the pattern where everything begins to change. We put language to the pattern that's been running our life silently, maybe for years. And just by doing that, we've taken back your first piece of control. Because here's the truth. Awareness is the doorway to change. It's not enough all by itself, but you can't change the story you haven't recognized you're telling. Now let's talk about the rewrite, not just as a concept, but as a process. Starting with step 1. Challenge the old story. When people say change your story, they sometimes imply it's a one and done thing. Like you just pick a new story and boom, you're transformed. But that's not how the brain works. Your old narrator isn't just a belief, it's a survival pattern. It will resist change quietly, even fiercely. Which is good, because that means it's built deep, and when you rewrite it, the transformation is deep too. But the first step is this. See the story, hear the narrator, and question both. Ask, who taught me this story? What was I trying to protect myself when I first started believing this? Does this story reflect who I'm becoming or who I want to outgrow? For example, the story might be, I always mess up when I start doing well. The questions, who taught me that? Maybe your dad used to say, don't get ahead of yourself every time you started succeeding at something. It sounded like a warning, not encouragement. Or you watched your mom strike out every time things were looking good. She'd get anxious and stop trusting the process. Maybe you internalized that fear. Or perhaps your first big success as a teenager ended in embarrassment. Maybe that experience made you feel like every win has a downside. Or maybe every time you failed after succeeding, someone around you said, see, I told you not to get excited. Maybe you learned to fear momentum. The next question, when did I start believing this? Maybe you started in school the first time you got an A and the next test you bombed. Maybe that planted the seed that success never sticks. Or it started when you got your first taste of winning at something and the aftermath was overwhelming. Maybe you started associating momentum with pressure. Or maybe it kicked in during early adulthood when you got a win at work or in a relationship only to feel like you jinxed it by celebrating too soon. Or maybe you don't remember the moment, but the pattern has been there long enough that it feels like it's always been true. And the final question is, am I willing to rewrite the story if it means I feel unfamiliar for a little while? Maybe the truth is you've been living with this belief for so long you don't know who you'd be without it. But maybe you're finally ready to feel unfamiliar if it means breaking the cycle. Or maybe you spent many years expecting the fall that celebrating the climb feels impossible. But what if you gave yourself the chance to stay with success long enough to get used to it? Or maybe you're scared of rewriting the story, but you're more scared of spending one more year living in a loop you outgrew a long time ago. Or maybe you're not fully sure how to rewrite it yet, but something in you is finally saying, if not now, then when. Sometimes your narrator isn't fighting you, it's just waiting for permission to evolve. So step 2 is write the new story. The next part is key, and is where most people get it wrong. You don't replace an old story with a perfect one. You replace it with a next stage story, something true enough to believe and bold enough to pull you forward. So the old story might be, I'm not disciplined. The transitional story might be, I'm becoming someone who follows through. And the new behavior you do to enforce that might be one small act of follow through per day. That's the magic formula. Story leads to identity, which leads to behavior, which leads to evidence, which leads to reinforced identity. You don't need proof to start the identity shift, you just need to act as if it's already true consistently until your brain rewires it. Step 3 is behavior anchors the story. So you become what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally feel. So once you write a new story, you must give your nervous system repetition to believe it. So for example, the new story might be, I'm becoming someone who honors their commitments. Then your mind goes, okay, well, show me. So for 7 days, you pick one commitment you will not break. Doesn't matter how small. Could be drinking a glass of water or writing a one-line trading log. The content doesn't matter. Consistency matters. Those identity reps are how we rewire the narrator over time. The narrator stops saying, I'm just not disciplined, and starts saying, this is just who I am now. Your nervous system doesn't trust declarations, it trusts repetition. So when you say, I'm a focused trader, but then act in chaos, it calls BS. But when you say, I am becoming someone who shows up with presence in each moment, and you train that presence in little moments, the body takes notes. Identity shifts happen from the outside in and the inside out simultaneously, through story, state, and repeated life experience. That's how it works. This isn't about just being more disciplined, it's about who you believe you are when no one's watching. Because if there's one thing I can tell you after teaching hundreds of traders over the past 5 years, it's this. You don't fail because of the market, you don't fail because of lack of strategy, you fail when your identity and your actions move in opposite directions. When the narrator doesn't believe what your behavior is trying to become, the pattern will snap right back. Want to break that cycle? Rewrite the narrator, reprogram the beliefs, and build habits that validate the new version of you. And do it in a community with accountability around people who are doing the same work. That's why we built Mind Over Markets. It's not a bunch of motivational fluff. It's not a try harder course. It's not a just be more disciplined seminar. It's a mindset rewiring system, a psychological training ground, an identity lab. For traders, for operators, and honestly for human beings who are tired of being pulled back by mental and emotional patterns that no longer serve them. If this video resonated with you, if you felt the narrator in your chest, if you've been fighting a pattern that never seems to go away, that's not a flaw, that is a story gap, and Mind Over Markets is where we close it. Stories don't trap us, we trap ourselves by not realizing we're the ones writing them. So write a new one. You don't have a trading problem, you have a story about trading. You do not have a productivity problem, you have a story about productivity. You don't have a discipline problem, you have a story about discipline. You're not broken, you're becoming. Reps, reset, repeat.